time in history, many nations engaged in an intra-global conflict. After 2 world wars, all that was done was the emergence of the state of Israel, the modern state of Israel. That's really the hand of God, and we have to stand back and just be awed at that.
We really do. I'm amazed. Kevin, I did a teaching from Jerusalem, actually in the Independence Hall Museum in Tel Aviv, where the Declaration of Independence was actually not only the speech was delivered by David Ben-Gurion, but then also the agreements were signed and so forth. And I stood in that very place and shared a teaching session called The Hand of God in History. And Kevin, what I did in that was I just kind of showed how God worked through the affairs of men, all the way back to a man by the name of Eliezer ben Yehuda, who in a barn outside the city of Paris felt led of God to bring back and to restore the lost religion of Hebrew, all the way to 1897. God working through an atheist, to Theodore Herzl, to convene that first Zionist conference. And fast forwarding to the time when Harry Truman, who was basically an unknown individual, ends up being the vice president to Theodore Roosevelt in his final and fourth term, who ultimately would then arise to the position of President of the United States upon his death in April of that year, 1945. And so God was working through what you said. Well, what does Harry Truman have to do? Well, Harry Truman was a believer from Independence, Missouri, but in his young years he worked in a haberdashery, a clothing store, and his partner in that business was a Jewish man. And his Jewish friend taught him all about what God had proclaimed in the Word of God about the nation of Israel and the Jewish people in the last days. Eddie Jacobson just taught the president. And so Truman becomes the president later on. And, of course, he is there when in May of 1948, against all advice from his Secretary of State, all of his staff, cabinet said, do not be involved with this idea of the Jews declaring a state. And yet 11 minutes, Kevin, after Ben-Gurion read this statement, Truman recognized the modern state of Israel. There's a monumental move in the affairs of the world. God was at work. Even how God used Richard Nixon in the Yom Kippur War in 1973. I mean, it's just amazing when you watch how God is going about his business. Here's the problem. It's not that God's not taking care of his business. It's that we're not paying attention to what God is doing because we're not doing due diligence in our own study of the Word of God.
Amen. Amen.